right. Okay, let's go ahead and call this meeting to order. We appreciate everybody being here for the Wednesday, June 18th, Harriman City Planning Commission, regular Planning Commission meeting. We'll begin with a Pledge of Allegiance, which will be led by our own Lauren Hoadley.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Lauren. We do have a full quorum tonight. We appreciate our members being here tonight. Just ask if there's any conflicts of interest from anyone on any of the agenda items at this time. Seeing none, we'll move on to item 3.4, which is an approval of our minutes for our May 21st, 2025 Planning Commission meeting.
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes.
Okay, we have a motion by Darrell.
We'll second it.
Second by Adam. All in favor?
Aye.
All right, we'll move on to our administrative items at this time. We'll move on to item 4.1, which is a consideration of approval for a conditional use site plan for a Quack car wash. Sheldon.
Okay, as you mentioned, this is a conditional use request for Quack. It's located, the site they're looking at is located in Academy Village. Just a general overview of the site. The site itself is zoned C2 commercial. The lot itself is 1.25 acre, and it's located, as I mentioned, at Academy Village, plot 39 on lot 39H. This property is, as well as, is governed by the South Hills MDA, which generally focuses on the technical design guidelines of the structures. The proposal consists of an automatic car wash. It's a car wash tunnel style car wash. It's a 4,000 square foot structure with the maximum height of 29 feet. The finished materials consist of integral colored split face CMU and stucco. Parking based on employees of the highest shift. The applicant did mention it's 2 to 3, just depends on how busy they are. Currently, they're providing 2 parking stalls, but speaking with the applicant, they said in the cases when they have to bring more employees in, the employees will just utilize the vacuum stalls to park those employees. Again, they're providing 34 parking stalls, and as I mentioned, additional employees will use the vacuum stalls when needed. Here's a review of the elevations. This is the northeast elevation. This would be facing, I guess, north. And then again, the south elevations here, you can see it consists of split face stucco, and there's some accent colors as well on there, yellows and greens, kind of to match their branding. There's an overall view of the site plan. The parking, the car wash itself, it can accommodate up to 24 stalls to queue through the car wash. Again, the site only has 1 access going in and out. They are providing direct pedestrian access to Real Vista, and again, they are providing additional crosswalks where necessary on the site. Their prepared landscape plan here, it does meet city standards with the exception of, as we discussed in the work meeting, is the master developer already installed the landscaping and the street trees and the parking strip areas. I didn't have the chance to visually confirm whether or not the ground cover got installed and what the condition of the state is in there. Speaking with the applicant, we just just made them aware that we would add an additional requirement, just stating that just to ensure that those parking strips are landscaped to city standards. Again, staff does look at the development standards, the C2 zone conditional use standards, and then again the South Hill technical guidelines. Engineering only had one concern, and that was just they were missing a water meter detail in their landscaping plan. With that being said, staff does recommend approval with the 2 conditions and is asking that the commission
Add the third
add the third condition there. Yep. The applicant is here if you have any questions, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Any questions for Sheldon? Thank you.
Sheldon, what are the surrounding uses?
What's that?
What are the surrounding uses?
So right now, there's nothing really developed. There'll be a 7-Eleven to the north of that site, but as far, I think this is the first development in Pod 39H.
So it's not like right next to residential, right?
No, so, yeah, the site itself is surrounded by commercially zoned lots, yeah.
Any other questions? Okay, thank you. All right, you said the applicant's here. If you'd like to come forward and provide any additional information, you're welcome to. And go ahead and just state your name, please, for the record.
Hi, Russell Nelson with Lone Star Builders. Staff's been great to work with. We've done extensive work with them. We try to make this decision as easy as possible for you. So I don't really have anything to add, but I'm happy to answer any questions. And I know you.
I know you too.
Yeah, URS.
Yes.
Yep.
Okay. I was like, wait a minute, I knew you too.
All right, we can talk about that later.
We'll talk
but-
about that later.
Yep.
There's
Happy
still
to
not
answer any questions.
There's still not a conflict between him and I, so I'll just clarify that, even though I know him, so there you
Yep.
go. Very
Okay.
good.
Thank you.
You don't
Thank
get to
you.
vote anyways.
Pardon me?
You don't get to vote anyways.
Yeah, that's true, unless there's a tie, so, very good. All right, thanks. Any discussion? This is not on for public hearing, so.
This one makes
This
sense,
is-
so.
yeah.
I'm ready to make a motion to approve item 4.1 with staff's, with the 3 requirements, the third one being park strips shall be landscaped to city standards.
I'll second that.
All right, we have a motion by Jackson and, motion by Adam and second by Jackson. We'll do a roll call vote. We'll begin with Forrest.
Yes.
Jackson.
Yes.
Preston.
Yes.
Adam.
Yes.
Daryl.
Yes.
And Andrea.
Yes.
All right, thank you. If you want to stick around. No, I'm kidding. Thanks, Russ, good to see you. All right, item 4.2, consideration of approval for a conditional use for the Commons residential. Clint.
This is a project that's been in the works for quite some time. Speaking to the overall development of the Commons, this is a residential portion located kind of on that northwest corner of the Commons site plan. This is the proposal before us tonight is to accommodate what they're asking for, so 200 units, 4 buildings, clubhouse, about 15% landscaping. They have a raised pedestrian crossing, and then about 1.7 stalls per unit. So this is the overall site plan of the Commons, and up in that top left portion, you can see buildings A, B, C, and D, with the clubhouse there as well. Those are the buildings that are being proposed tonight. This is just some renderings that they provided of the buildings, how they'll be situated, and some kind of give you an idea on the finishing materials and such. So, in terms of the buildings, they're about 50 feet tall. They can go a little bit taller than that. I think the ordinance allows up to 70 feet or 75. Anyways, the finished materials are there. They're consistent with the quality and materials that are present in the commercial portion of the development. A lot of really nice design features here, especially at the pedestrian scale. In terms of landscaping, as I mentioned, there is 15% of coverage. They are providing street trees where there are not street trees currently, and then trees in the parking islands. They have a list of nice amenities for the residents on site as well. So in terms of the planning and zoning, what things that we look at and review, everything seems to be in compliance with the MDA and with zoning ordinance. There's a few issues that we would like to see resolved. One of them is just parking screening. So in the MDA, it does require a 42-inch berm or screening from the parking areas to the street. Along that western side, the parking will be about 4 feet below that, so that satisfies it there. But in these areas where the red lines are, that distance isn't quite there, so we're just requesting that the applicant install some shrubbery along those along those areas to provide that screening. And then, and just provide the dumpster location or the dumpster material. In terms of engineering, there is a list of things that, small details that need to be worked out as it moves toward to final approval. Some of the requests that we have for this, and I think that they are largely in compliance already, is just to make sure that any wall seating is between the 18 and 30 inches, And we discussed the raised pedestrian crossing, the material that they'll be using there, and I think we're satisfied with the material that they're proposing. So this is our recommendation for the proposal. Again, just our typical recommendations. So that second one, the affordable housing, in the MDA, there's a requirement that requires the applicant to provide a certain level of affordable housing, and we will review that as it comes to the building permit stage. So before any conditions or any CFOs are provided, we will make sure that that is in compliance. Anyways, any questions with the presentation that I've given so far?
Questions?
One quick one. On the actual pavers, does that beat the rest of the development? Versus, on the last requirement, you got actual pavers versus stamped concrete. Is the rest of
I
the
think our
development-
request is just that they don't do stamped concrete, and the applicants, I think they're going to do scored concrete, which is, they can probably talk to that better.
Okay.
But in our last meeting, when we talked with them, I feel like the material that they're proposing is material that we're excited about for that raised pedestrian feature.
So I'll just extend that to them when they
Yeah.
come up. That question, perfect.
On the affordable housing component, are we doing that in more MDAs or what's the reasoning behind that?
It's just part of the MDA, just to ensure that, the state has a mandate for the city to provide a certain level of affordable housing, and so we figured that would be a good opportunity to capture some of that.
Will we do that in more, do you think? In more developments or?
Phone a friend, go ahead.
The affordable housing component was required because we gave an incentive to the overall project, and the state legislature passed rules a couple years ago that we have to meet the affordable requirements. So that's why it's included, and yes, we'll probably see more of it, especially in Olympia.
Good, thank you.
Thanks, Blake. The applicant's here, and they've got a presentation to go through as well, so.
Yeah, unless there's any other questions for Clint, let's, allow the applicant to come forward.
Hi, good evening. Tom Sheldon from Pivot North Architects out of Boise, Idaho. We're the architects. I'm here with John King from Pivot North, and then we have Jeff Richardson, who's landscape architect. We'll be here for any questions on a lot of this stuff like that. Last time we met, I went over kind of the concepts for the site plan location, why we put the buildings where they were and where the streets are and all that. So I won't go over that anymore. You already saw that. Also, we had some precedent images of the architecture. We actually have now some renderings so you can see it in 3D versus just elevations, and it does make a difference. But one thing I wanted to mention, though, is if you look at this site plan, you can see all the surface parking to the south, right? And you can see the energy that's up in the northwest corner. And we really want to take advantage of that. There's a lot of density, there's housing, there is the small shops as opposed to the big retail box. And so it was really important for us to take advantage of that. And so you can see kind of that red area there. It's kind of the heart of the area, primarily for pedestrians coming from the north and east and west and south. There's cars coming in there. We want to slow them down. We wanted to make it feel very, neighborhood-like and very walkable and bikeable. So street design is important. So we updated our street section. This is the street section that goes the north-south road. It's a very traditional design that has street trees and on-street parking. We have some large balconies off all the units that face there. We have these patios on the ground floor that you'll see some images. But again, the whole idea there is to slow people down, see your neighbors, eyes on the street, all of that. And the landscape architect did a great job of delineating between sidewalks and planter strips and street trees and street planter tree grates. So this is an example of what it would look like, actually at one of the pedestrian crossings in the middle of the main street. Here you can see our materials now. We have high-quality materials at the ground level. We have the brick, we have wood, we have steel and glass, things that, you know, when people touch and see, it's important. The backdrop, the dark color, is a lap siding, and it's purposeful there in order to bring the kind of the white stucco and forward. And the whole idea is, if we zoom forward here, is each unit on the ground floor actually has what I'm calling a front door, even though they have a door that's inside off the hallway. So they have their address. We were just talking some details on how each unit would have their own little address. We even talked to the fire department about it a little bit. But the idea is that if you had guests, they would park on the street and walk in your door rather than going in and going down the hallway and things like that. So this is all about, you know, bringing the community together.
So on that image, real quick, before you leave that, it looks
Sure.
like that crosswalk there is raised then. At least from my perspective, the way
Yeah,
I'm seeing that. Is that true? Is that, the mid one's going to be raised as well?
No.
Okay, I
good
just want to
catch.
clarify that.
Good
Yeah.
catch. Yeah, the renderer did that. You know, we'll evaluate it, but right now, it's not. In the
Yeah.
drawings that you have, it's not.
Right, I just want to clarify
Now
that.
granted, it does slow traffic down, but it's not a very long block, so.
Right.
Yeah. So this was an early sketch of we didn't actually do a rendering, but it shows you as you're walking down the sidewalk, you see these patios and then the decks. And these decks are, I think, 5 by 9, so they're large. If you go back, you can see they're big enough for a 2-top little bistro table or a nice lounge chair. A couple, 3 people can be out there. So they're not just little decks. This is kind of the long view, and as you can see as you're working past it, the whole idea is as you're walking down the street here, you're going by all of the residential units, you get to the clubhouse and the welcoming center, and then we have our tabletop, which will show you an image there, and you can see the 2 green trees, and then you go down to the retail. Landscape architect Jeff did a good job in negotiating with the retailers to switch their trees on the east-west road to match ours. So the whole idea is when they grow, you create a canopy that you see in the old neighborhoods where you're kind of going down a tunnel of green trees. And we're going to try to do that on our north-south road as well. So again, slow people down, slow traffic. This is the image of looking up the street. So this is where the welcoming center is and the street that we're talking about. Here you can see the scored concrete, and then Jeff can talk about what the actual crosswalk is made out of. But it is a tabletop, again, to slow traffic down. And the welcoming center actually has higher quality materials. It has more of a durable materials here, lighting. You can see the deck on the outside, views to the mountains, and then there's future tenant parking in front of it. This is the view looking the other direction towards the retail. So this would be the street that has on-street parking and the little stoops. And you can see these trees are, hopefully they'll grow big and kind of create that tunnel in there. And I think that's it. Just for dotting some I's and crossing some T's, here is our trash enclosure and our carport. The carport is low and thin, and if we go back here, you can see the grayed out areas is where all the carports are located. You can see where the little icon for trash, where that's located. So that's all I have. If you have any questions, and also I can leave it here if you have any landscape questions, and I'll stand for any questions. Thank you.
Yeah, go ahead, Forrest, I was going to say.
Go ahead.
Or Jackson, excuse me.
First one was a follow-up to the one that I asked previously. There was doing the pavers instead of stamped concrete. Does that match the rest of the
Well,
project?
we're not doing stamped concrete. Totally agree with you on that one, because we want to look real.
The scored concrete there.
I think the question really is about fire trucks and big trucks with pavers. But I don't know if you want to address the. Sure. Yeah.
Oh, great.
Jeff.
Yeah.
So Jeff Richardson from Landform Design Group, so we are the landscape architects on this. So to answer the question, part of the master development, we have coordinated the actual concrete colors
Okay.
to match. So if we introduce pavers, we'd be the only one here that has that. So that actual kind of brown color is semi-realistic to what would be installed. It's an integral color concrete, and it'll contrast.
Then it'll match the rest of the project.
Correct,
with
yeah.
that.
So
Okay,
they have
perfect.
similar situations, in select areas. We probably have a little bit more as just a percentage of our project, but yeah.
Okay.
And I think we're all with you. We don't really love the stamped concrete. We like a little bit of a cleaner finish on it. And just for pavers, when it's in the public road like that, eventually one will get popped out by a snowplow or something. So we also have that kind of long-term maintenance issue that we want to make sure we address.
Cool. Sounds good.
Great.
Any landscape questions, or do I know?
Yeah. Forrest, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, I
now.
think that, and I brought this up during the work meeting too, on the North Road above this, some of the smallest trees are in the planting strip, along that road. I have two concerns about it. Number one, it's not really defining one of the largest roads, that is connecting this development. And number two, the way that they overhang the sidewalks and stuff like that now, they're low trees. So, they max at like 6 foot, is the bottom of their greenery, and then they only get up to about 15 feet, more or less. And so I'm a little worried that that's going to have a very industrial kind of feel to it, especially trying to hide the parking and stuff like that. So I guess my question is, can those be upgraded so that they're more in line with kind of what the trees you're using on the main street or along the connector on the south? Yeah.
I'm going to jump in and say I have no problem doing that, and you can tell us that we must do that, and I'll take that to the adjacent property, and we'll tell them we have to match our property with some bigger trees there, if that's.
But that was the fill that was, you're matching the fill of the rest of the development,
Correct, yeah.
right?
It
Just
to
that's why
clarify,
those are the way they are.
We're on the northwest quadrant of a fairly large development, and so kind of our perimeter areas, we're trying to tie in. We're not necessarily matching, shrub for shrub, but street trees and mulch and style of irrigation will be consistent. That's just so, it's that nice feel as you're driving along the whole development. We don't want to make it feel like, we just developed, we just designed our corner and everyone else can do what they want.
Exactly.
We want
We want some consistency as well along there.
But feel free to, up the ante a little bit.
I'll put that as a note. I'll say you demanded it.
And then the other question that I had is probably more architectural in nature. We had asked the question if these covered parking pavilions, if they could have any kind of solar components on top of them to help.
Good question. Our office is investigating any grants or any, things like that. And I believe there are some out there, and we are going to be actively looking for them.
Great.
And we'll see, because, and even on our building, the idea is that they could power the common area lights.
Sure.
Yeah, things like that. Probably not the units, but the common area lights and things like that.
I mean, there's a lot of surface area for,
Yeah,
this
exactly.
covered parking area, and so
Exactly, yeah.
why not use that space? So, great, thanks.
Any other questions for Tom?
I have one.
Yes.
So
by all means.
architectural this time.
Yeah.
In the rendering for the clubhouse, I'm assuming this is a metal panel on the upper floors.
It is, yeah.
And just as a proviso, we do require concealed fastener with those metal panels.
Say that again, sorry?
Concealed fastener on our metal panels.
Oh, okay, yeah.
So if that's, and this is just a rendering, I realize that.
Yeah, I mean, there's so many products that do have concealed fasteners, is that right? Yeah, that shouldn't be a problem.
Perfect.
One thing you see here is we're also, which I didn't mention because it doesn't show it here, that we have this kind of wood soffit on let's see here, on these buildings. And the whole idea is that we want to uplight those and actually soon, so people can look up. And then one of the last thing is we're okay with the recommended items for approval that you had on that list.
Good. Cool. Okay. Anyone else? Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate your time. All right. Discussion, any thoughts? I know Forrest made the comment about the trees. Any other opinions on
Yeah.
those perimeter trees?
I agree with Forrest. I like the idea of the larger trees.
A little bit larger, look like
I
these.
don't know how that ties into the rest of the development though, so you'd have to,
You mean the larger trees, because when I heard you say that, but it sounded like we were describing, you meant the north road, and I thought I was hearing the south road. Maybe.
Take the ones that are on the south road and make them the same type of trees on the north.
Right.
Correct.
Right. Just for height and for, like, in this rendering, this is actually a good example. You know, the bottom of the actual leaves and branches are tall enough that you can actually walk under them and not have to dodge it. But the trees that were shown on the north road have a much lower canopy and overhang the actual
Well, the north
sidewalk,
road
so
as
it
well
makes it a
as-
little uncomfortable to walk
and
through.
we
and-
should be about that. I mean, as a commission, we should be about keeping our city with the right look and
No, I agree.
the aesthetics that we want.
But I want to clarify, I think it was also on the west
Yeah,
road
it was
as
the
well.
north-
It was the
north
perimeter,
west.
whatever was along the public
North and
streets,
the
not
west.
just the north, but the west as
Right.
well.
Which I understand that across the street where the apartments are, they have those little tiny baby 1 inch.
Yeah.
Yeah, the,
trees just sitting there and, you know, we don't want that look.
Right.
With something like this, you know, you want to draw people into the neighborhood and not like drive by.
Yep.
Yeah. Agreed.
Any other,
have to say
any
on
other
the-
opinion on that? Yeah.
On the architecture, I think it's done well. I like how they've activated the street with the stoop and the patios. And I do like the 18-inch walls. Those are a lot easier to sit on. Taller than that gets a little harder to sit on, but
Yeah.
it's allowed to be 18, so I think that's.
That's great. I agree. I like the look.
I know it wasn't meant to, the elevated crosswalks within the neighborhood. I just want to put out my opinion, even though it is a short road and those are mostly for speed, still the feel of that little bit of elevation on a crosswalk is always a benefit. So if that is something to consider, that is an option, that would be preferable in my opinion.
I guess we'd have to look at city standards and things like that. I don't know.
It's within.
Within an MDA, maybe it's okay, but the question there, whether you could put a mid-block raised as well. Yeah, go ahead, and if you want to make a comment, we'll allow that.
Yeah, I think that's a good thing to consider. We would just need to run it by our civil engineer for drainage and
Yes.
that kind of stuff. You see them in a lot of small towns, even in retail areas, so. Yes, it's something that we could put in as a consideration.
Enhances the feel, for
Yeah,
sure.
and we're asking our engineering that now.
Blake may have a comment.
Yeah, does staff have any thoughts, one way or the other there? Blake does. Go ahead, please.
Yeah, I think that we're good either way. I think the way that they're proposing it would work.
It is it looks like it's a different color, or, you know, it's the scored concrete as well. So it is providing definitely a different look as you're approaching the crosswalk.
You went
as
right
well.
where I was going to go. Is
Okay.
The MDA and the standards for the city should have a different material to offset what it looks like. But if you were going to request it, I think it's a request. I think it's outside of the standard. So
Yeah.
request that, maybe look into it. It sounds like they're
Yeah.
willing to, but if
We
it's
probably
not
can't
feasible, we
require
can't
it.
require it.
Yeah, we
Yeah,
can't
not a
require it.
requirement, just
Yeah.
a suggestion.
They also have the
More like a
bump outside
guideline,
that makes
not
that pedestrian crossing a lot shorter and easier to,
Mm-hmm.
you know. for-
Yeah. Yeah, this is a narrow,
It's-
right?
You're not going
I
to be
like,
speeding down this road.
yeah, and I like the fill with the park strip, right? The sidewalk, park strip, on-street parking, couple narrow lanes for traffic, and the
Connection
same.
to retail is also nice.
Connection to retail, yeah, exactly. It's a great product. It'd be nice. Any other thoughts? Maybe we could go to the slide, help us with the slide with the staff's recommendations, just so we can see those and see if we want to add another. So that'd be the other, well, I don't know how your presentation's set up.
While he's getting to that,
there
I
we
just
go.
want to echo our staff's,
Thank you. There you go. Perfect.
our comments to these, to the application and the site design. So we've just gotten back from this CNU conference, and, you know, a lot of that is talking about, you know, building neighborhoods and creating very intentional spaces, and I think that this group has done a really good job with this, the way that, you know, when they talked through how they designed it, it wasn't just looking from the 30,000, but they went down to the, you know, the ground floor and really created a place for a neighborhood to occur, and providing these spaces for people to, you know, to gather and meet and to walk. So it's a very well done project. We're excited to see it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'll agree with that. I think for future projects, we should really try to incorporate some of these into the future projects.
I agree.
So getting back to the discussion on the trees around the north and west, is that going to be, can we make that a requirement, or is that going to be another recommendation?
I think it follows the recommendation. We were just looking at it. That tree is on our approved tree list.
It is on your approved tree list,
and,
so.
for park strip trees, so.
Yeah.
There
Thank you
is
for
the
that
concern.
clarification.
We do have a requirement that you have to have 7 feet clearance for vehicles and pedestrians to walk underneath. So those are the two things you're gonna probably balance there, is it's on the approved list, but ensure that it's the right size that you can get the clearance.
Okay, okay. Thank you for that. I wanted to get that clarified. So I don't know if there's really, I guess you can make a suggestion or like that in a motion, but.
None of those are in motions. They've already heard that now. So.
Yeah, they've heard it, so we probably can't make it in a motion, so, yeah. All right, any other discussion? Or a motion?
If everyone's done, I'm ready for a motion.
Go ahead.
I'll make a motion to approve item 4.2, the consideration of approval for a conditional use on the Commons project in Harriman, subject to the staff's recommendations, with a request, a suggestion that the perimeter trees get upsized, and leave it at that.
I'll second it.
All right, we have a motion by Darrell and a second by Adam. We'll do a vote. We'll begin with Andrea.
Yes.
Darrell.
Yes.
Adam.
Yes.
Preston.
Yes.
Jackson.
Yes.
Forrest.
Yes.
Very good, thank you. Looking forward to this product, so thank you for all your time and what you're doing for our community. We appreciate it. All right, before I move on to the next item, it is up for a public hearing, so with that, I do want to read the public hearing, or the public comment policy and procedure. So the purpose of public comment is to allow citizens to address items on the agenda. Citizens requesting to address the commission will be asked to complete a written comment form and present it to the city recorder. In general, the chair will allow an individual 3 minutes to address the commission. A spokesperson recognized as representing the group in attendance may be allowed up to 5 minutes. This applies to all public hearings. With that, we'll move on to item 5.1. Sheldon.
Okay, so this is a request to amend several sections of Harriman City Code. This request was brought to us by Strangling Brothers Honda Circus. They were requesting several text amendments to, they're recommending several amendments so they can, man, I'm lost for words here. So currently, Harriman City Code would not allow this particular use in the city as what they're proposing. Therefore, they've requested several text amendments to hopefully change some texts to accommodate this use. Again, this meeting was noticed on June 6th of 2025. So the applicant, they are proposing four amendments. One amendment is amending the definition of recreational vehicles storage to include semi-trailers. The second one is to amend a subsection in the M1 manufacturing development standards to allow for an 8-foot high vinyl coated chain link fence with privacy slats in lieu of a precast fence as required under the M1 development standards. And then adding in a separate subsection to the M1 development standards to allow for an exception to fencing based on visibility criteria. The fourth amendment is asking to amend the ordinance to allow for seasonal businesses to operate more than 10 days, which is currently allowed by ordinance. They're asking to push that up to 35 days. So the First Amendment here, as I mentioned, this would be an amendment to our definition of recreational vehicle storage. Essentially, what the amendment is imposing is allowing the storage of semi-trailers in the recreational vehicle storage yards. Now, this would be limited to the M1 zone. Again, there are several concerns, again, that staff has looked at based on their findings. I do apologize, there's a lot of text on a lot of these slides. I did provide you a little summary, hopefully makes this a little easier to get through. So based off the request, staff did analyze, the impacts of what potential impacts that could be associated with amending this ordinance to allow the storage of semi-trailers. While looking at the size and visual impacts, again, everybody knows some people have large RVs. I've seen large RVs that are 45 feet long and 20 feet tall, a little exaggeration there. But then again, on the average, most of your RV trailers are around 30 feet in length, 10 to 11 feet in height. Again, with semi-trailers, you're looking more between an average of 40 feet and 13 feet in height. This would require additional buffering or landscaping or screening to lessen this visual impact created by allowing the storage of semi-trailers. Again, there's a potential of visual blight, depending on the condition of those trailers being stored, how many are stored in that area, and how they impact adjacent properties, right? It could almost give a perceived look as if there's more of an intense industrial use on a use that wouldn't permit such high intense uses, specifically in the industrial areas. Again, there's consideration of traffic and site designs. Again, this would be more relevant to our existing storage facilities here that are in the M1 zone. Again, a lot of these wouldn't be able to accommodate, these larger trailers and et cetera. It could cause congestion for ingress and egress, especially if the access is off like a local road or even a collector road. Again, in addition to that, you are, potentially, increasing road wear by having such heavy vehicles on these smaller roads. Again, then enforcement challenges is another aspect we looked at. Even though the amendment does state that the trailers cannot be used for freighting purposes, it'd be difficult to manage that. It would be at the property owner's discretion. Again, it would require additional monitoring resources from the city to ensure that they're not actually operating a freight terminal or some sort of freighting business from that site. Noise impacts. Now again, bringing in these larger trailers, you're looking at larger vehicles. Again, you're going to have constant idling from these larger semis and the noises they make. And again, we don't know what time the pickup and drop off of these vehicles are. Again, potentially impacting adjacent properties. As mentioned, I guess when we talked at the work meeting, so that, the most suitable use for this type of storage would be in our M2 zone, which is a higher intensive industrial use. Under like our freight terminal land use, again, that's not specific to storage of semi, but I think would be more conducive to this type of storage. That being said, staff does recommend the recommendation of denial to the City Council. The Second Amendment, again, this pertains to the development standards in the M1 manufacturing zone. Currently, under that subsection, it just states that all outdoor storage has to be confined behind a 6-foot precast masonry wall. What they're proposing is to add an exception or an alternate to it to allow an 8-foot high vinyl coated fence in lieu of that precast fence. Now, one thing, I guess, when staff was looking at this, doing some research, we did find, there are some conflicting ordinance here, within our city code where our fencing regulations does not allow chain link fencing with the exception of recreational uses. But then in our screening ordinance, it does state that they can use chain link fence in lieu of a precast wall in the M1 zone. But as that's written, there's no standards I guess, there's no standards to dictate on, how you'd meet that requirement and where that would be acceptable to allow that exception to happen. Staff has indicated, several instances where that would be, acceptable possibly in a manufacturing zone where they could, install an 8-foot chain link fence as opposed to a precast. These would be like in larger manufacturing zones where, you're not adjacent to residential properties. If there's existing precast on a border, internally, they may have that option. Again, that's some examples, and, I'm sure we could come up with a few more on that. With that being said, staff does recommend a positive recommendation for this amendment with the following conditions, and that's just to allow staff and the applicant to work on to develop those standards to allow for that exception. And again, we'd actually like to have that exception to be at the discretion of the Planning Commission. If you guys have any questions?
What's said on that one, I was looking at your summary there, you wanted to make sure that the no storage would exceed the height of the screening as well, right? So
Right, and that's one as well.
Yeah.
And yeah, that's kind of, yeah.
I kind of agree with, but with semis, you're gonna have some.
Again, yeah, that would
tall-
be another issue
tall
there
screening,
with the
right.
storing of with the semi-trailers, is that it wouldn't necessarily fully screen those trailers.
Exactly.
The third amendment, again, this would be an entirely new subsection to the M1 zone, and this would be a visibility-based exception to remove the fencing requirement. This would be based on whether or not the storage area could be seen from a public right-of-way, an open space, or a public trail. Again, this does bring concerns, with staff in our findings here. Let me just go ahead and, let's see. And part of their ordinance, they do address some of this, they do set a requirement for how much visibility, how much of the site can be seen. Again, part of that amendment includes a visibility analyst, brief narrative describing how that would be stored. And again, there are some other standards they have introduced as well in this amendment. We're looking at, and staff again looking at the impacts that, could result from amending that ordinance is, I guess the number one is kind of public safety and security risks. Obviously, if there's no fencing, if this is allowed, there's potential that, there'll be storage areas that can be accessed because there's no fencing, there's no barrier there. We could, incentivize theft, vandalism, trespassing. Again, there's a potential of accidental entry into hazardous areas. And again, there's liabilities that, the city or the property owner may face by allowing, open storage of hazardous materials and et cetera. Visual aesthetics and impacts. Again, removing the fencing requirement, maybe relying on landscaping, seasonal changes, right? The landscaping will lose its leaves, and then that visual screening's no longer viable. Again, maintaining that landscaping to ensure that there's a visual barrier. Again, it'd be hard, staff just finds that'd be difficult to maintain that visual screening without a fence. And again, the impacts on adjacent properties or future developments, again, seeing open storage, it may distract from potential developers, it may cause visual nuisances to adjacent properties, and again, create somewhat of a visual impact of a more industrial intense use in an area that wouldn't typically allow that type of use. That being said, staff does recommend the commission forward a recommendation of denial to the city council. Now, the fourth and final amendment, this would be, again, adding an entirely new subsection to 10-30-5 with temporary uses. Currently, this Harriman City ordinance only allows for temporary uses of this type for a maximum operating of 10 days per calendar year. What the applicant is proposing is an exception to add an extension of time, or a method to add an extension of time to allow up to 35 operating days per calendar year. Again, this would, and then they're asking as well if they can ask for additional time for setup and cleanup. Again, that would be at the discretion of the Planning Commission, the way this is proposed. Again, they'd have to put together a plan, showing, if they do need this additional time to set up or break down. Again, they're limiting this particular extension to commercial and manufacturing zones. And obviously they have to provide adequate parking and emergency access as well. Again, part of this proposal, it does include an application process, standards to meet, and et cetera. Looking, at this amendment, staff did, highlight some benefits that could come from allowing a longer seasonal temporary use. Again, that would support seasonal commerce, providing, again, temporary uses like pumpkin packs, circuses, haunted circuses, Christmas markets, et cetera. Again, that will generate local revenue, short-term job creation. Again, this will add a little bit of community engagement as well, just as additional recreational options for city residents to attend, during these seasonal things, as well as build community identity and maybe creating annual traditions and boosting civic pride. And again, it draws a bit of tourism depending on the attraction. Again, this would allow, vacant lots or underutilized lots to be more beneficial, providing benefits to the city without impacting infrastructure and stuff like that, because it's not, it's not a permanent use. It'd be just a temporary use. That being said, the staff does recommend the commission forward a positive recommendation to the city regarding this amendment with the following condition. That's one, just state that 30 days of operation shall be consecutive, including weekends and holidays. Again, that would be only once per year. And then with large events with high traffic volumes, that should be reviewed by the engineer, police, and public works, and et cetera. This final page here, just as I'm wrapping up, this just goes over all the staff recommendations. If you do have any questions, I'll be happy to answer those.
It's a lot. Thank you.
It is a lot, yeah.
Well done. Well done. Any questions for Sheldon?
I have a question about the final amendment. Mentioned in our discussion in the previous meeting about this. So an example that comes to mind, and I don't know if this would be applicable technically in this one or not, but like a Pixar putt that you see in Riverton. I don't know if you're familiar with that. So they set up a pop-up putt-putt course in like a parking area. And it is a temporary setup. I would imagine its season is going to be from about May all the way through September, October. So this 35 days, I can see where it's applicable to certain seasonal aspects, but I don't know if we really have a tool to enable or allow that sort of an event or situation. So I'm kind of wondering why we've made the decision of 35 days and where we may be able to find flexibility in that.
Right, and the 35 days, that was something that was proposed by the applicant. City staff didn't really have any issues with that number. We were kind of, well, 30 days kind of seemed more, I guess, traditional or expected, but again, they asked for 35 days. There is, stating whether or not like a pop-up would be permitted as a temporary use, I don't see why it wouldn't be, as it is a temporary use. I think it would fall under, we could look at the ordinance and possibly update that if that's, to maybe clarify that for that particular type of use or similar uses.
Or have them come in for a variance, right? They could even request a variance if they wanted something like that.
Yeah, like a variance wouldn't be applicable.
Wouldn't be applicable.
You're looking at self-imposed
Gotcha.
hardships here.
Okay.
And again, as Preston, as we discussed earlier too, we could look at an option to actually do an additional process to extend that time to longer than 35
yeah,
days.
some sort of.
Yeah.
Well, and it specifically says only one instance within a calendar year. And so, yeah, if we had a mechanism to extend that, another 35 days after, so you have like 65 days or 70 days, I guess, to accommodate something like that.
Sure.
Gotcha. And then that'd be probably less, I guess, legwork to say, okay, you can apply for an additional extension, as opposed to saying, okay, go through this process to define how many days you want to utilize. But.
Yeah, I just don't want it to be an economic barrier for something that's a creative.
Yeah, understandable.
Business idea.
Yeah, and that's why we're kind of.
I lean on making it so it was its own application within itself, so that you don't have to capture everything. So I personally like the 10 days as just like a generic fireworks stand kind of thing, and then have the opportunity for applications like this, if this is what we want to do, and that's its own. In this case, it's 35 days. If it's a putt-putt, it's 65 days. Like, I don't think that matters. I think we need to look at what the impacts in the community are, which is why I don't personally want to adjust this less than 10. I think we need to have the provision in some zones to allow for temporary uses that we plan ahead for those uses, because that way we can make sure the resources that are coming to support that are planned ahead of time. rather than just a reactionary
Time
thing.
limitless provision request process.
Correct. Versus
Yes.
almost like a temporary conditional use permit style process
Yeah.
to support things like that rather than
Right.
wholesale adjustment.
So let's continue the question. No, I agree, but that's a good topic conversation after we get through public hearing and whatnot on this item. So if there's any more questions for Sheldon about these, and then we can let the applicant come forward, have the hearing, and then have a discussion, so.
Yeah, for section, I think it's section 10-3-4E, and this is the visibility. So if I look down at your recommendations, or maybe it was the applicant's recommendations, that the developer would be able to decide whether or not to do the screening?
So, well, currently as it's written, well, yeah, as it's proposed, right, that discretion would be at the developer, right? There's no standard saying, you know, how you can get that exception, right?
Right.
How it's written, it just says, you can use an 8-foot vinyl fence in lieu, that's all it says. And even how it's currently written, there's no standard to justify that exception.
Okay.
And again, I just kind of made the point, you know, even as it's presented, we're kind of the same boat where that discretionary decision falls under the developer, not the city itself.
Yeah. That's what I thought it said. I just wanted to clarify that that's what it was saying, because
Yeah.
we can discuss it, whether that's a good idea or a bad idea, but
Yeah.
yeah. Thank you.
Okay. Excellent. Anything else? Questions for Sheldon? Yeah, thank you. Yeah, we'll allow the applicant to come forward now. Yeah, by all means.
Thanks.
Please, thank you. Yes, please come forward, provide any additional information. State your name as well for us, please.
Zach Tillotson. Thanks
Zach.
for following through that. I know we're asking for a lot. So I want to give just a little bit more background of what we have here. So everyone's familiar with haunted houses. What we have is a kind of portable production, similar to a carnival that comes in town. What we're kind of set up to do is take advantage of properties that are not developed yet and not planned to be developed for many, many years. So I don't know if you're familiar with where we're looking, but it's right on the very south end of Harriman, right on the border, near Camp Williams. Not much development going on there. So we can bring in income for the landowner, we can take advantage of that property, and then we can move. Our typical cadence is about 5 to 7 years. We started in Draper, 2011. We're currently in American Fork, and now we're looking to move up to Harriman. So the challenge that we're used to coming across both here in Utah and in Texas is figuring out a way to get the city approval to get in there, because it's very unique. So I understand that my interest is all in our production down here, but these affect the city as a whole. We're completely aware of that. So I want to bring up a couple things that we kind of bring some clarity to things, and then some ideas from our end of things. So to kind of hit these one by one, I'll come back to the semi-storage, because that's the biggest one for us. But the no need for fencing with a certain visibility, we understand that, and we're okay with that. We want to see if that was a possibility, just because of the specific property where you can only see from our visualizations about 2 feet of the top of our tent when the production's in play. We thought that might be a possibility, but we understand if that's not something we want to deal with. The biggest thing we have is the storage of the semi-trailer. So where we're only operational, we are a seasonal production, but it does require the storage of our facility there. And that's all built into semi-trailers for security reasons, for transport reasons, for all that good stuff. But it does require us to leave that there. That's what we've done in the previous cities. But I understand the changes that can be made here can cause all kinds of issues with the other storage facilities throughout the city. So some thoughts that we had were potentially a provision in there that exception for vehicles that are trailers that aren't moved, they're essentially used for storage, with the need for screening to cover that. Another one was an exception for businesses that are actually physically ran out of those trailers. That's very kind of unique to what we have here. Semi-trailers are either used for freight or used for storage is kind of the big thing. Where we're actually physically operating out of those. That is what the attraction's built into, going in and out of those trailers. We feel like those might help to kind of make this work between us. And I believe we have put together kind of a list of the benefits to the city that I believe was forwarded on to you guys, but I want to hit on the most important ones here, which are, it's a huge temporary job opportunity, especially for high school age kids. We typically employ about 100 to 150 teenage to college age kids throughout that season. And then obviously the tax revenue being kind of the biggest benefits, but we have several other things we like to do to try and be a positive member. We like to try to stand out as more of a family-friendly production versus some of the other ones that you see, especially out further west. But yeah, that's kind of what I have for you. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Zach. Any questions for the applicant? Thoughts? Okay.
Okay.
Thank you
so much.
We may have you come back if we have more as we go through our discussion. So again, as I mentioned, this is up for a public hearing. So I'm going to go ahead and we'll hold a public hearing at this time and go from there. So if there's anybody that wants to make comment, open up the public hearing. Doubt there's anyone online. Anyway, I haven't seen any comments come in. Okay, seeing no comments, I'll ask for a motion to close the public hearing.
So moved.
I have a motion by Adam. Do I have a second?
Second.
Oh, Forrest got that one. Second by Forrest. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right. Discussion by Planning Commission.
Can we go to like the summary one so that we don't have to hop back and forth? Whatever.
The main summary.
The
at
main
last.
summary at the
Yeah.
last, I think, would be just easier.
Oops. This one
So for me, like I said in the work meeting, I feel like this is something that's a great idea. I don't think it's the right to just wholesale adjust the M1 zone. I think going with more of like an M2 and actually citing an M2 or something like that would make more sense for me. I have the entire time I've been a planning commissioner fought for no in lieu of chain link fence, including city has to pay for utilities that have precast fence. I think that's a detriment to the community. And so I don't personally want to allow that in any way, shape, or form. So there's that one. And then the one I would actually say is I do think temporary uses make sense, but I think that's a wholesale issue by itself that the city needs to think of. And that I don't know how to capture that in this. So rather than just say, go with 35 days, I think it would make more sense to have temporary uses for different seasons of the year. Those make sense to me. And I would like to have them be their own application within themselves rather than quantifying a generic day. Because each of those uses has different impacts. Like I look at the city's ice skating rink, that's a great impact. Those are, to me, kind of temporary uses. And so we need to kind of plan around those. And I think it's a great idea, whether it be a haunted house or whatever it is. I just personally don't think this is the right way to adjust to support that business. That's my opinion for all of those.
Great. Any thoughts? Any other ideas? Concerns? Comments?
I think I would also say that changing the entirety of the M1 zone is a lot. You end up with, all the semi-trailers that you see in the farmers' fields all up and down the freeway would end up here instead. So, I don't know.
I also agree with you, and I should have said this before. I think it's a slippery slope when we start calling RVs and tractor trailers similar. Like, to me, I think we'll start having that problem everywhere, like you're saying with the farms.
Yeah.
Yeah, we had some discussion in the work meeting about maybe an application for an M2 zone change for this particular property as well might be more applicable, and then figuring out a way to get it to fit within an M2, because the M2 right now is not quite the right fit for this business, but maybe there's a way to adjust the M2. It's a lot closer, and since we don't have any in here in the city, if we can do an M2 change and then allow the M2 to have this type of facility is probably a better solution. I agree.
But I do think temporary uses might make sense to have, and I don't know how to, that'd be more on the staff level, is where temporary uses may make sense everywhere in different forms or fashions, like for different things, like Preston's idea with the putt thing, like those would be better for us to start to, and not everything's going to be brick and mortar forever, and having the ability to do things like this are great. I think we just have to figure out how to quantify where those can be and where they can't be based off the type of use and the type of look that they may bring even during that short duration.
Well, you also mentioned, don't let me put words in your mouth, but you were saying that you feel like keeping the 10 days appropriate, not change, a wholesale change, but allow some type of
flexibility use that allows you for temporary uses to be reviewed and evaluated on their own merits.
Right.
Because they are, I would imagine this draws a large amount of traffic and which is good, but I think the city needs to be a little more involved than just saying, okay, let's just do 35 days or 42 days or whatever the right number is. I think each temporary should be its own, depending on how large of a attraction it is.
A temporary use code.
Correct.
Of itself.
By itself.
That is application driven.
Gotcha.
I'd agree with that. I just to make a generic, one size fits all, that's just not going to work for me. I'd rather them stand on their own merits, bring it to us.
And that's why I also, with what you're saying, I think that would also address the fencing and things like that, because temporary is temporary versus.
If they 30 days have a temporary
Safety fence.
chain link fence for a haunted house because that fits the theme, but it's only for 30 days and that's how it's set up for that reason, okay.
Then that's a different discussion than
Yeah,
opening up utility requirements and fences and stuff like that.
This is in my mind, this is the absolute definition of unintended consequences. We're not even able to think it through yet to know what kind of consequences are out there.
And then especially because this has the potential to stay storage for a longer time than, that's a different topic to me, which is why I don't like the idea of just opening it up. I think there's the temporary use piece, which is awesome, and then there's the storage use, which is a different topic altogether.
I wonder if I don't know, it's kind of a question that maybe for them, if the trailers could be stored in the tent.
Probably not big enough for the tent. They wouldn't fit in the tent. Yeah.
Okay, just trying to think outside the box.
Yeah.
Yeah, because if they're fully screened, no problem. Store what you want. If they're fully
pole barns.
if they're covered. Yeah.
Yeah,
You know, house, though you'd probably need like 15 pole barns to.
that's true. You probably need quite a few pole barns.
Yeah. I'm of the same opinion that I understand the reason why they're putting these forward is to make it easier and to allow Herman to experience this haunted house, but making wholesale changes to the M1 zones really would just open it up to, a lot of issues, especially when it comes to recreational vehicle storage. We just went through this as a
Painfully.
community.
That was very painful.
It was very painful, and we all still don't agree on how many there should be, but this would open it up to ridiculous amounts of recreational vehicles,
Well,
in
and
the M1 zone.
oh, excuse me. Sorry, was that it? Okay. No, and we talked about this in the work meeting, but I want to get it on the record too, is the M1 zone is primarily on this south end, for sure. But with the construction of Mountain View Corridor through there, everybody there's going to be a lot more traffic on Mountain View Corridor than we see on Redwood. You're not going to see it on Redwood as much.
Yeah.
But this M1 zone, as you're entering Harriman, we want to make sure that view and the first thoughts of Harriman coming in is not detrimental to the,
Correct.
to the view and the image of the city as well.
Sure.
So,
But
I wanted to put that out there too.
I agree, but going back to the temporary uses, there's many areas in the city that we have commercial land that sat vacant for a while that I think temporary uses would make logical sense there. That have traffic and have roadways and have the ability for our police to do their work and things like that. So that's why I think a temporary use issue is its own challenge. And then I think finding specific storage for this type of storage is a different discussion.
Agreed. Yeah.
So with that, I'm ready to make a recommendation to city council. If
Any other
no one else-
discussions before? Andrea, did you have an opportunity? Did you want to say anything?
I
You were the
agree
only
with
one that we
Adam,
hadn't heard from
so-
on this, so you're
Yeah,
okay?
I agree with Adam, so.
Okay, all right. Go ahead.
So I'm going to recommend denial of all of the proposed changes, with a reason being that I think we need to address MU2, storage being its, M2, sorry, I didn't mean to say MU2. M2 being its own storage would be the likely location where storage would be, and adjusting there. I do not think any fencing adjustments should be mitigated. And I do think that the city, it would make sense to come up with a temporary use per zone process or permit or application or zone or whatever, I don't know the right magic that would be called. And that's its own basis. So that's why I'm making a recommendation for denial, because of there, to me, are three separate issues.
Okay, we have a,
Second.
okay, we have a recommendation by Adam and a second by Preston. Again, this is a recommendation to city council, and the motion is denial for all four. So with that, we'll do a roll call vote and begin with Forrest.
Yes.
Jackson.
And I'm torn because I love the idea of having something like this here, but I will agree, yes.
Preston.
Yes.
Adam.
Yes.
Daryl.
Yes.
And Andrea.
Yes.
All right, so that moves forward with a recommendation to city council for denial on all four items. All right, with that, that's not to say we don't want it here. We just, the M1 zone is just very, we want to preserve that as well. So, and I guess that's my comment as the chair. Is there any other comments from Planning Commission? All right.
I like Adam's thoughts on the temporary.
Yeah.
There's a more,
We-
maybe a more flexible way of approaching it.
Right. That,
And that way we could pick what zones make sense. Like we talked in the work meeting, that school land, if the school wanted to put a temporary use like this, that would make, to me, I don't think it has to be in a corner of our development.
Pumpkin patch and agriculture.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because that happens, right? And that would be awesome to get more of those type of venues here.
Yep.
Great. All right. Future meetings next week, June 25th, is City Council meeting. July 2nd, that is our next Planning Commission. It's close to the 4th of July, but it's still prior to. I'll be around, I'm assuming. Don't know, maybe we just do a quick check here, make sure people's are going to be around. You'll be out? You'll be here. Forrest, are you around on that day? Okay.
What day?
July 2nd.
Sorry.
No, you're fine. Just want to make sure we're going to be able to hold a quorum that day.
Sorry. let me
It's
check.
close to the holiday, so Adam, you'll be around. Okay, Daryl, Andrea. Okay. Sounds like we'll have enough to have a quorum, so.
Sure, I'll be here.
All right, good. We only were losing one, and we got two that are not here tonight. So, okay. Next Planning Commission, July 2nd. With that, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Motion by Adam. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second. I'm sorry, who said that? Forrest? Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you. Should have done an over-under on